Paul Mason. I'm joined now by the Labour MP, Khalid Mahmood, and the environmental campaigner, George Monbiot, who's joining the Heathrow protest later this week. George Monbiot, are you going to take part in direct action?
Yes, I will. I don't yet know what the direct action is going to be, but as long as it's non-violent, which it will be, I'll be joining it.
So what about the front of the Evening Standard, which talks about hoax packages being dropped, scaling the perimeter fence around Heathrow and entering places like Starbucks and McDonald's and then making a protest? Will you condemn that action?
It's just complete nonsense. They plucked that story out of the air. They don't seem to have spoken to any of the people at the climate change camp. And who knows where they got it from, because it's an unsourced story. It just does not seem to stand up at all. I think it's just pure journalistic bluster.
OK, do you condemn any action like that?
I would condemn any action which spilt over into violence against people, into hurting people of any kind. But I don't condemn direct action which might be disruptive, because the question keeps coming to me, what on earth are we going to do about the expansion of airports?
George Monbiot, before we can talk about that, let me just quite nail this. You say that you condemn any action that is violent action. I'm going to ask you just again, you would condemn anyone that leaves a hoax package, and you would condemn anyone that scales a perimeter fence, just to be clear?
I would condemn anyone who leaves a hoax package, no question about that. Scaling the perimeter fence, perhaps not. Well,
that presumably would cause disruption to the hundreds of thousands of passengers that go through Heathrow, which is what the protesters said they weren't going to do.
Well, I don't know what's going to happen, but I see the threat of climate change as being a far, far greater threat than the threat of disruption to some people's holiday plans.
Khalid Mahmood, the protester in the film surely was quite right there when she said that in an age of terrorism, of course you must be allowed legitimate protests, because otherwise people stay in their homes and in a sense the terrorists have won.
I would agree with that entirely. I think there is an issue of lawful protests, and I think there's absolutely no problem with that. I think where George is coming from, and I think he didn't quite fully answer your question, is the issue of some of these people where there are bogus packages being left. If people are scaling...
That's not happened yet.
Possibly, and if people are possibly going to be climbing the perimeter fences, and there is a possibility of an accident being caused to a landing or a taking off airliner, there's a huge fatality issue there, and I think these are issues that need to take a look at responsibility. To encourage that sort of stuff, George, to encourage that sort of action, I think, is totally and utterly irresponsible.
There is no question of putting people's lives at risk. There is no question of planting hoax bombs.
But if you're not prepared to condemn somebody scaling a fence, George, if you're not prepared to condemn somebody scaling a fence into an airport where there are aircraft landing and taking off, that potentially does that.
Scaling a fence does not mean the same as sitting on a runway or stopping a plane from landing.
Well, where are they going to go? If they scale a fence, where are they going to
go? There's all sorts of places in an airport. I don't know where people are going to go, but I can tell you that they will not be endangering anyone's lives. They will not be preventing planes from landing. They will not be causing any of the disruption highlighted in the pure scare stories in the Evening Standard.
You can guarantee that?
Well, I don't know exactly what is going to be done, but I do know that that stuff is completely off the agenda. So, yes, I can guarantee that.
It is surely rather heavy-handed of the police to use anti-terror legislation to search people going peacefully into a camp a kilometre away from Heathrow.
I think when people are raising those sort of stakes, and there's been quite a significant judicial process that's been engaged in this as well.
Doesn't it kind of indicate that these people are regarded as terrorists?
If you look at what's been going on the G8 summits and the way that people have behaved, I think the problem that we've got here is the police can't take those chances.
George Monbiot, I just want to talk to you now about the dangers of climate change. We know the terror threat is a real and present danger. Very recently, of course, the burning car was driven into Glasgow Airport. But according to NASA, now, 1998 is no longer the hottest year. 1934 was, so surely there are still arguments to be had over climate change. And in the midst of those arguments, air travel contributes to 7% of carbon emissions, so perhaps you've got the wrong target.
We are talking about 99% of climate scientists or so saying that man-made climate change is taking place and presents a very grave threat indeed to human life on Earth. We're talking about an impact which could run into harming, possibly even killing hundreds of millions of people. As for the impact of aviation, According to my calculations, and you can see all the workings and the references on my website, by 2050, aviation will account for between 91% and 258% of the government's target for carbon emissions for the entire economy. It's absolutely clear that this growth in aviation is a mortal threat to human beings and to the biosphere.
Sorry to interrupt. Khalid, Mahmood, just very briefly, the government's chief scientific officer said that there is no bigger problem than climate change. Presumably you would think that the terror threat is as big.
The terror threat is as big, but it's more immediate. It has been more direct, and that is the issue that we're going to look at. This issue of climate change is a serious issue, which is a long-term issue, and all of us have got to be able to put research and issues onto that to look at that issue seriously.
Thank you both.